Welcome to TAGHS True Asian Ghost and Horror Stories, the podcast that explores the world's most mysterious and spine-chilling tales. Today, we continue with Chapter 1 of the book, Room Number 4. This is the first story in a series of 12 chapters that make up the book. However, we will only present Chapter 1, leaving the remaining chapters undisclosed. Today's story delves into Chapter 1 of Room Number 4, a fascinating tale written by its author about a mysterious phenomenon involving the persistent attachment of spirits from the supernatural world. The story begins with a Japanese man, a professional drone videographer specializing in aerial filmmaking. He has a wife who works as a TV presenter for a major Japanese broadcasting station, and together they have a 1-year-old baby. Both husband and wife enjoy successful careers, living a stable and thriving life as a family. This man was, in fact, a researcher specializing in science and technology. His work and expertise had always been grounded in logic and rationality. However, throughout his career, he had taken part in producing numerous horror films, some of which were built on scripts so vividly realistic or based on stories claimed to be true that they stirred something within him, a lingering curiosity. This curiosity eventually grew into a persistent question that haunted his mind. Does the spiritual world truly exist? It was this question that ultimately led him to an unusual decision during the work hiatus. Instead of choosing a typical vacation, he joined a group of individuals who, while sharing a passion for science, also harbored a deep fascination with the supernatural. This group's mission was to explore and investigate paranormal phenomena, blending curiosity for the unknown with a scientific approach. Their destination was no ordinary place. It was a location in China surrounded by an ominous reputation, known for countless tales of hauntings and ghostly encounters. Leading the group was a seasoned Taoist master, a figure both enigmatic and deeply revered. This master was not only well-versed in the principles of Taoism, but also possessed profound knowledge of the spirit world and the mysterious forces that dwell within it. Under his guidance, the group ventured into the heart of the unknown, embarking on a journey that promised answers but might also uncover terrors beyond their imagination. The master's program involved leading a group of science enthusiasts to spiritual landmarks across China. During these journeys, participants would not only visit these mysterious sites, but also hear first-hand accounts of supernatural tales shared by the local residents. Additionally, the group engaged in charitable activities, offering assistance to underprivileged communities in the areas they explored. For the Japanese filmmaker, joining this group seemed like an opportunity for a refreshing break, akin to a summer vacation or a relaxing leave after long months of work. He saw it as a chance to satisfy his curiosity and explore something out of the ordinary. Little did he know, this seemingly innocuous trip would entangle him in a spine-chilling tale of the supernatural, one that would leave a mark far deeper than he could ever have anticipated. The filmmaker was a firm believer in science, and his initial approach to everything was grounded in scientific reasoning. He would only believe in the supernatural if undeniable evidence presented itself, like a demon materializing directly in front of him or witnessing a phenomenon that was 100% real. For instance, if someone wanted to convince him that ghosts exist, the ghost would need to appear right beside him and engage him in conversation for him to accept it as truth. Although the group consisted of science enthusiasts who were intrigued by the spiritual realm, there were not a few among them who joined with the specific purpose of debunking the existence of the supernatural. They relied on their scientific knowledge to disprove the claims of the paranormal. This perspective is precisely what the author of Room Number 4 captured about the Japanese filmmaker, a man whose skepticism would soon be challenged by experiences far beyond his understanding. When the filmmaker arrived in the area, he was assigned a room in a hotel. Upon entering, the group leader, a Taoist master, addressed everyone, saying, "Remember to humbly seek permission from the lady of this hotel room to stay here safely overnight. Above all, do not engage in any disrespectful actions that might provoke her." The master then pointedly added, "And yes, I'm talking to you," clearly directing his words at the Japanese filmmaker. The reason for this specific warning was the master's perception of the filmmaker's skeptical attitude toward the supernatural. In response, the filmmaker simply smiled and nodded, brushing off the room. However, once he was inside his room, He set up all his belongings on the table, including several hidden cameras, intending to record everything happening in the room. Silently, he made a vow. If there truly was a spirit or demonic presence in the room, he wished to witness it firsthand. After his prayer, the filmmaker noticed that nothing seemed out of the ordinary that night. The next day, he joined the group to begin their charity activities as planned. However, when night fell as he was sleeping, he was startled by the distinct sound of clogs echoing through the hallway. Despite his firm belief in science and skepticism of the supernatural, fear crept into him, manifesting in a way he couldn't ignore. Though his rational mind told him there was no such thing as spirits, his body betrayed him, gripped by an unshakable sense of dread. He began to wonder if the program had orchestrated the noises to heighten the experience for participants, crafting an illusion to evoke fear and excitement. Yet, deep down, he couldn't fully dismiss the possibility that this wasn't a staged event. The persistent clop-clop sound continued outside his door. Curious yet fearful, he cracked his eyes open and turned toward the hallway. His heart pounded as he cautiously peered out, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever or whatever might be moving outside. Peering through the crack of his door, he was met with a chilling sight. A pair of legs wearing red clogs, accompanied by a red dress swaying just above the knees, right in front of him. A wave of terror surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm, convincing himself that it was merely an illusion or a trick of the mind. He closed his eyes tightly, hoping to rationalize the experience as nothing more than a prank orchestrated by the Taoist master and the group, something his cameras would undoubtedly expose the next day. As he tried to regain his composure, something even more unsettling began to happen. Soft, delicate hands seemed to emerge from beneath the red-clad figure's feet, slowly crawling up toward his body. The sensation was strangely gentle, yet it stirred an overwhelming wave of desire within him, something entirely foreign and uncontrollable. Caught in this hauntingly seductive encounter, he found himself succumbing to the presence. But just as he neared a breaking point, his rational mind screamed at him to stop, to resist, to not cross the boundary into a world he neither understood nor believed in. Fighting to regain control, he restrained himself, desperate not to make a mistake that could forever tether him to the realm of the dead. Determined to confront the truth, he forced his eyes open, hoping to see a person, anything but a demonic spirit. Summoning his courage, he reached out and pushed the figure away, attempting to regain control of the situation. The thought of his wife and child flashed vividly in his mind. He knew he couldn't allow himself to continue down this path. Doing so would mean betraying his family and the love they shared, no matter how surreal or overwhelming the moment felt. He reminded himself of his responsibility and the vows he had made, choosing to resist whatever force was drawing him in. When he opened his eyes, what he saw was not a normal person but the headless corpse of a woman. Her body was still moving, and the exposed flesh on her neck appeared fresh, as if the head had been severed only moments ago. Blood poured from her neck, drenching him completely. Overwhelmed with terror, he bolted out of the room, screaming for help and waking the others. The Taoist master emerged, asking what had happened. Shaking and furious, the filmmaker recounted the horrifying experience, accusing the group of staging the entire ordeal. He lashed out, demanding to know why they would create such an elaborate ruse, particularly involving a woman in such a way. He insisted he was a man of principle and would never betray his wife and family, angrily questioning why they would manipulate him like this. The master, calm but firm, replied, "Nothing was staged here. Your refusal to believe in the spiritual world has led you to make a grave mistake, and now it's too late to undo it. That spirit has attached itself to you, and unless we perform a ritual to expel it, it will follow you back to Japan." But the filmmaker dismissed the warning, refusing to believe in such things. He quickly packed up his cameras and belongings, determined to leave as soon as possible. Catching the earliest transport, he abandoned the group and returned to a major city in China. Once he reached his hotel, he immediately began reviewing the footage from the cameras he had set up in the haunted room. To his shock and disbelief, there was no evidence of a headless woman or anything supernatural. All the videos showed only him, alone, acting out everything he thought had happened. The realization left him more disturbed than ever, as he was forced to confront the possibility that either he had experienced something inexplicable, or that his mind had betrayed him in ways he could not comprehend. While in the hotel room, he had faced what he was certain was a headless woman, and the encounter left him utterly terrified. That night, he couldn't bring himself to sleep, despite being in a modern, well-equipped hotel. Overcome with fear, he quickly booked the earliest flight back to Japan. Before dawn, he packed all his belongings and left the hotel, choosing to wait at the airport rather than stay another minute in that room. Once on the plane and heading home, he began to feel a sense of relief. When he finally arrived in Japan and reunited with his family, everything seemed normal. However, later that evening, after taking a shower, his wife noticed something strange. Pointing to his back, she asked, "Why are there 5 handprints on your back?" Startled, he tried to brush it off, explaining, "It's nothing, probably just an allergic reaction or a rash. Don't worry, it's not related to anything." Despite his calm response, unease lingered in the back of his mind, as he couldn't fully dismiss the memory of what had happened. He began to grow increasingly afraid as unsettling occurrences took hold in his home. The house felt colder and gloomier than usual, and he could hear strange, whispering voices carried by the wind. These were sounds unlike anything normal, subtle yet unnerving, as if tearing through the air in a way only he could perceive. The sounds were peculiar, the kind that only specific people could hear. Perhaps it depended on age or sensitivity. Younger or older individuals couldn't seem to detect them. Yet, for the Japanese filmmaker, these eerie noises were clear, distinct, and impossible to ignore, haunting him in his solitude. Over time, the repeated experiences broke his skepticism, forcing him to confront the truth. The spirit, or perhaps even a demon, was real and had followed him back home, just as the Taoist master had warned. Accepting this horrifying reality, he sought out a local exorcist in Japan to perform a ritual to banish the spirit and cleanse his home of its sinister presence. Believing that Japanese exorcists and their methods were more effective than those of the Chinese, the filmmaker sought out a Japanese shaman to cleanse him of the malevolent spirit. The shaman prepared a ritual, one that differed greatly from traditional Chinese practices. Unlike the use of talismans, charms, rice wine, or cinnabar ink often associated with Chinese exorcisms, Japanese shamans typically employed gentler, more symbolic methods. They might dance, play instruments like drums or flutes, or perform rituals that sought to guide the spirit away peacefully. During the ritual, the Japanese shaman began to dance and play his drum before sitting down, his face etched with concern. He turned to the filmmaker and said gravely, "I'm sorry. The spirit clinging to you is not just a wandering soul but a demon, a powerful, dangerous one. I cannot exorcise it unless you are willing to make a sacrifice." Faced with desperation, the filmmaker made a selfish choice. He offered up his wife's career in exchange for his own safety. The sacrifice worked, and the demon's presence left him. However, the cost was steep. Soon after the ritual, his wife began experiencing a series of misfortunes at her job in the broadcasting industry, eventually forcing her to resign. She found herself unable to pursue any other career and was relegated to staying at home to care for their child. The toll of these events weighed heavily on her, leading to severe stress and frustration. Over the years, she frequently blamed her husband for their misfortunes. Though her accusations stung, he understood why she felt the way she did. Deep down, he carried the guilt of knowing that her hardships were a direct result of his selfish decision. He had chosen to save himself at the expense of her dreams, and that realization stayed with him, gnawing at his conscience as he struggled to live with the consequences of his actions. Believing the nightmare was behind them, the filmmaker suggested selling their old house and moving to a new one. He hoped that a fresh start would bring positive changes, including a new beginning for his wife's career. Since the pact with the demon, there had been no more strange occurrences in their home, no sightings of the malevolent spirit. The only lingering effects were the tension and strain on his family relationships. Years passed, and by the time they moved to a new house, Their child was 5 or 6 years old. This wasn't a short-lived ordeal, but a haunting that spanned many years. Once settled in their new home, life seemed normal again. Encouraged by this change, the filmmaker allowed his wife to return to work. Gradually, her career began to recover, and she became deeply involved in her job once more. After 1 or 2 months, everything seemed to be improving. She was earning a steady income, and the family started to feel at ease. Even her resentment toward her husband began to fade, and peace returned to their household. But one night, as the filmmaker was reading the newspaper, his child, now old enough to speak clearly, walked to the corner of the room and uttered something that froze him in terror. The child pointed to the empty corner and said, "Why doesn't she have a head? Why is she standing there? There's my dad." Hearing this, the man's hands trembled, and the newspaper slipped from his grasp. A cold dread swept over him as he realized the truth. The demon had returned. His child could see what he thought had been banished long ago. The headless spirit was standing right there, in their home. Worse still, he recalled the terrible oath he had made, that if his wife's career was restored, another family member would have to pay the price. Terrified and desperate, he sought out the shaman who had helped him all those years ago. When they met, the shaman's expression grew grim as he listened to the man's story. He explained, "You have broken the pact you made with the demon. Now, there are only 2 choices. Either you pay with your life, or your child must pay with theirs." The man decided to take responsibility for the pact and chose to sacrifice himself. Quietly, he left his wife and child behind, returning to China without a word. His destination was the same place where his nightmare had begun, seeking out the Taoist master who had first led him to the spirit. Driven by desperation, he wanted to uncover the truth about the demon, who it was and why it had inflicted so much pain and suffering upon him for 6 long years. Upon finding the master again, the shaman agreed to help him banish the demon once and for all, promising to eliminate its presence at the very root. Together, they returned to the region where the man had first encountered the spirit. There, they prepared a ritual altar and began the process of sealing the demon at its origin. However, by the next morning, something inexplicable had happened. The Taoist master was dead, and in the man's hands was a knife, the very weapon used to kill the master. The man was promptly arrested and imprisoned in China. Strangely, the prison where he was held turned out to be the very one mentioned in the opening chapter of room number 4. His cell was located right next to the infamous room number 4 itself. 3 months into his incarceration, the prison guards opened his cell one morning to find him dead under horrifying circumstances. He was discovered kneeling, with his abdomen slit open and his organs gruesomely pulled out and scattered around him. His death marked the chilling end of a story filled with fear, betrayal, and the supernatural. A tale that haunted not only him but anyone who dared to uncover its secrets. And that concludes one of the key events in chapter 1 of room number 4. A story that reveals the existence of many types of demons in this world. The first demon introduced in room number 4 is a headless entity resembling a young woman, dressed in a red gown and red shoes. After completing this chapter, the author moves on to write chapter 2, but we've chosen to share only the first chapter with our audience. This decision comes from our desire to avoid bringing any misfortune to our viewers. Instead, we'll continue sharing other spine-chilling true ghost stories and real-life crime cases to keep you intrigued and entertained. That's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, TAGHS, True Asian Ghost and Horror Stories, to support us and help our channel grow even further. Thank you.